Okay, so I'm just going to ask you to watch this little video here, and then we can say a few things about it. So there's two bar magnets there. One is aluminum, the other one is glass. Which one you think is going to reach the end faster? The glass or the aluminum? Which one of the two is going to reach the end faster? Now, I can ask you the question. You can raise your hand. I'll do that in a second. But where's my thingy here? There it is. Let's put it in here. And let's come back here. Where are we? I think we're here. And let's go back here. So, which one will reach the end faster? If you think glass, choose A in your clicker. If you think if you think aluminum, choose B in your clicker, right? So turn on your clicker. If you think the glass, if you think the glass object would reach the bottom faster, just choose A. If you choose the aluminum one, reach the end faster, you can choose B. Aluminum B, glass A. All right. Let's see what you guys are thinking right now. This is what I call a perfect teaching situation, right? So it looks like you guys are completely divided right now, and some of you even are so confused that are actually choosing C, right? C was not an option, so you chose C. I have no idea what you are actually choosing. But I'm going to give you a chance to talk to the person next to you, right? Talk to the person next to you to see if you can convince the person. If you think you're really right about the answer, talk to the person next to you, all right? All right, so I'm going to give you the chance. Maybe you were convinced. I'm going to give you a chance to vote again. And always the last vote is the one that I record here. So vote again, A or B, A glass, B aluminum. And let's see if we are able to change any of your, someone was, wow, you guys are pretty stubborn, right? Some of you guys are, the ones for A are pretty stubborn. All right, so let me say a few things here. Okay. So this is kind of to recreate a large class. Now, this is kind of to get the feeling if you were we're in a room with a very small number of people, but usually a lot of your classes in STEM, if you're teaching the class or you're TAing for the class or you're in the class, STEM classes tend to be large. All right? So and not all of them are, but the first year classes tend to be large. And the way I bring this is because up to last 4 months ago, I've actually been here only 4 months, I was teaching in this classroom. That was my classroom at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. About 800 students. And the classroom, it's not a classroom, it's a theater. Holds about 1,500. That's what you see from the top. That's what I would see when I was standing on the stage. That's kind of from the back, the middle center. That's kind of like before one of my lectures. People are getting ready for my show. So really elaborated lectures I usually have, right? And this is the building from outside. So the building is the classroom. And then that's one of my last classes. Really well attended. So when I first started teaching in, in a small liberal arts college, particularly two of them, Hamilton College and the College of Worcester. So I've always been a firm believer on interacting with students. So my style before coming to this large class was basically the Socratic Method. Anyone knows what the Socratic Method is? You know what's that?
It's where you ask questions.
Yeah, you just ask questions. So I basically ask questions, and the answers from the students is kind of the way the lecture goes, right? So I was very, very much that style. I really, really like it. So I started doing that when I came into the large classroom. Now, one of the first things I noticed that no one wanted to talk to me. Like, no one wanted to answer the questions, right? And what I realized is that I was really facing some really terrible dynamics and issues of human behavior, right? When faced with this reality right here, Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, he used to say that when you go to a funeral, the person doing the eulogy rather be dead in the casket, right? So this is what I was facing. One of the fears of most people is public speaking. So when I was in a class with 30 or 35, probably I can get close to the person, I can kind of put some kind of pressure, right? Because there's kind of this social exchange idea that I get close to people, then they feel that they have to answer, right? So in a class of 30 or 35, that's pretty easy. The Socratic Method may work or may not work. In a class with 500, 800, 300, 200, even 100, so the more the students, the less propensity you have to get answers. People don't like to talk on public, right? They'd rather be dead than actually be talking to you. So obviously I was facing with this, and this was a really revelation, and this is what I was getting in my classes, right? And I used to sit out, I used to put my TA to kind of teach the class, and I used to wear a cap and go to the second floor, see what the hell was going on in the second floor. And that's what's going on the second floor, right? People were kind of falling asleep. And I very quickly have to come up with some different ways in which to engage students. And part of the things I develop, part of the things I discover are some of the things I'm going to share with you today. And basically, the idea that I use even in a large class, it can also the same idea that I use in any class, that is really a matter of perspective, right? The class is going to be whatever dynamics you create in the class. And if you just lecture and talk to the students, you get certain dynamics. If you try to engage the students in different way, you will get different dynamics. And you can do those things in any kind of class, in any kind of classroom. I try to engage my students in my large classes, and I'll probably do kind of similar things when I do in my small classes. So most of the things that we're going to talk about here should apply to both, right? But it's a matter of perspective. OK, so let me start with a very basic question. What do you think learning is? What is learning?
Transferring knowledge?
Huh? Transfer of knowledge. Transfer from what to where to where?
From the one who knows.
From the one who knows?
The one who don't.
The one who don't knows, all right? So it's a transfer of knowledge from the one who knows to the one who knows. And how is that transfer? How does the transfer works?
How does it happen?
How does it happen? If I tell you something, you know it?
No. You have to explain.
You have to explain. OK, so if I tell you something and explain it, then you know it.
Probably.
Maybe, maybe not. Right. That's one. What else is other definitions for learning? What learning is? Let me get here first. Yes? Ongoing process. All right, so it's a developing process. Someone says anything around here? Yes?
Just knowing things.
Knowing things. All right, so again, the idea that learning is knowing things.
Acquiring knowledge.
Acquiring knowledge. Right, so both of you actually are thinking about the idea of knowledge, right? Acquiring knowledge. Again, how do you acquire the knowledge? Asking questions, all right? That way, why is asking questions a good way to kind of transfer or acquire knowledge?
Because you can have somebody tell you something, but if you don't understand it,
OK.
and you don't let them know that you don't understand it.
Yeah, so the person who's actually receiving have to ask questions in order to make sure that the person telling the thing actually fill the gap that you actually have, right? Very good. Asking questions, knowledge. Huh? What?
It allows you to think.
Allow you to think. What do you mean with that, allow you to think? Was there any thinking in the transfer knowledge that you were talking about? Is there any thinking from the person giving the knowledge?
He must think how to give it in the proper way.
OK, well, how about if I take a piece of paper here and I kind of read it to the class? Am I thinking? No. Maybe very little thinking, right? How about the person receiving?
Before you thought,
Huh?
you wrote it while thinking, yes? If you not write something
Yeah,
on
there's definitely some thinking, right? But the idea is like, I think what you're saying is that the more thinking that goes, perhaps the more knowledge you have.
More understanding.
Okay, so you're getting into the brain now, right? So you're getting into thinking that happens in the brain. What else?
Making mistakes.
Making mistakes. Why is making mistakes a good thing for learning?
You learn how not to do it. You learn the ways in which you can.
Yeah. Can you give an example of a situation in which you have learned by making mistakes?
Yeah, you write a program, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You learn that.
You write a program, it doesn't work. If you find an error, you probably won't do it again, right? But if you don't make that mistake, you probably will never have learned it, right? So you learn by making mistakes. Very good. Is there any way that by me talking to you and you receiving, is there any way that you can make mistakes?
Usually not. You just receive.
No, not unless you yourself are doing it, right? You have to do it yourself in order to make a mistake, right? Very good. What else? Other ideas of what is learning? How does it occur? Huh? Experimenting, right? Trial and error. You have any idea of a situation in which you have learned something by trial and error?
Yeah.
Well, what kind of thing you have learned by trial and error?
The example of programming.
The example of programming. What other things we have learned by trial and error? Projects. Anyone playing a board game ever? It's like usually, well, there's one person, the really geeky guy, he starts reading all the instructions there, and usually you say, well, let's just play and see how it goes, right? We're just going to play and see, and we learn by playing, right? Or you're riding a bike. How do you learn to ride a bike? By riding the actual bike, right? And then by falling down and getting up and riding it again, right? It's by trial and error. Most of those things are experimenting, trial and error, making mistakes. Now, this is very, very important because all those things that you're saying, if you, in fact, agree, then the transfer, which is one way in which we can actually do it, the transfer of information, me telling you things, will create some knowledge on you. But the knowledge that happens when you experiment, when you do trial and error, when you do questions, that knowledge will not occur if there's only me talking to you. Right? Now, that is kind of something that for most of us kind of makes sense, right? That's how for some reason, we kind of, when you go to college and you sit down to listen to the person lecturer, you kind of accept it as a way you have to actually learn the things you do in college, which is completely different from the way you learn things when you were little, when you were a kid, or when you were trying to do anything else in life. Right? For some reason, for some people, it doesn't make sense automatically. For some people, it makes sense. For me, it did not make a lot of sense, the fact that if I was going to teach something, I just have to simply talk to people. Right? My idea is that people can get that from a textbook. I know how to read. People know how to read, so there's no reason for me to simply just read. Right? But there are some biological reasons as to why being active, which is this idea of trial and error, experimenting, asking questions, is in fact the way people actually learn. Now, this is a biological definition of learning. Learning is defined as stabilizing through repeated use certain appropriate and desirable synapses in the brain. So when you are learning something, in your brain, something is happening, right? Neurons are connecting. Some connections are being created, right? Those connections, if I tell you the demand curve, which is an economic term, is downward sloping, that connection that knows that fact, that knows that reality, in my brain, that's being made. I have already made that connection in my brain. That synapse was created. Now, if you have never taken an economics class, you don't have that synapses yet in your brain. You don't know that yet. And for you to know it, that has to occur. It's an active process in your brain that has to occur. So for it to happen, it may not be just enough for me to tell you that's the way it is. Because for you to actually, for that synapses to occur in your brain, you may have to do it yourself. You may have to make a mistake. You may have to ask a question. You may have to do trial and error until eventually that synapses is actually made in the brain. So and the brain is an active process. So therefore, when we actually engage in learning, we should expect that it should also be active, right? So this biological research in the last 10 or 20, probably in the last 20 years, has really propelled a lot of practical applications in the classroom. And the idea of active, how many of you have heard of active learning before? Raise your hand. Right, so most of you have asked this question 20 years ago. Most people didn't even know what that means. But in the last 10 or 15 years, probably 20 years, there has been a push from the practical people in the classrooms teaching any discipline. STEM has actually came, in some instances, for instance, physics have been, and chemistry have been at the forefront. Some other disciplines in the STEM of science and technology, economics, for instance, have been a little slow to adapt. But there's really been a real big push from educators and people in the classroom that active learning is really the way we actually learn, right? And it's important. It doesn't mean that that the lecture, that me telling you stuff and you listening, it doesn't make any sense. There's some instances in which a lecture will make sense, and I will talk to you about it in a second. But there's other stuff that have to happen in order for anyone to work. The other important thing about this definition is that learning is hard work. If there's some stuff that are going to happen in your brain and those connections have to occur, you cannot do it usually by listening to someone. You're going to forget about it, right? What most of the research said is that what is the retention rate, the average retention rate that when people actually listen to a lecture, the information that you get in the lecture? Less than an hour. Usually it's about at the 20-minute mark you start losing. Most people forget more than 50% after 50 minutes. You lose 50% of it is just gone, right? And there's like research on that. The synapses will not occur. In order for that to occur, when you learn to ride a bike, right, you have to do it and do it every day and do it every day, and until eventually you take the training wheels out and you fall down and you pick the bike again and you start riding, and it takes, I don't remember. I mean, it usually took about 2 or 3 days at least, right? And one might actually be able to do it in 2 minutes, but most people actually take a little bit of time. So it's hard work, right? So learning is hard work. Okay, so what I'm going to give you today is basically five basic tips, and we're going to do them ourselves, that I think will help you understand why active learning is kind of a good way of going about teaching or learning, and things that you could do in your classroom if you actually are in the classroom, or things that you, if you eventually teach, that you can do pretty easily. All right. So I'm going to give you basically 5 rules in the next, how long we have left? We have about an hour. I'm going to give you 5 basic rules to implement active learning, particularly targeted to STEM. I teach economics, which is very technical, so work for that very well for that. Okay. So before I started doing any active learning, this was my traditional class in supply and demand, right? So I will come to a classroom, right? Welcome all of you. How are you doing? Today we're talking about shifting demand and supply, right? Suppose that an increase in demand for a particular good arises. What happens to equilibrium? Demand increases, shifting the demand curve up, out, and to the right. At the original equilibrium price, excess demand exists in the market. Makes sense. Buyers will drive up their price to outbid other buyers for the shortage. Right? Makes, of course. As the price rises, quantity supply rises. All right. The price and the quantity continue to rise until the equilibrium is reached. And in a free market, the equilibrium price will adjust rather quickly. There you have it. Nice, right? You're ready for the exam, right? So that was my lecture in economics, right? I will move on to the next lecture right away. Now, I also, when I started playing out with PowerPoint, I have all these kind of great ideas. I also used to put my name on the bottom and the number there in every slide, just to make sure that people don't forget who I was, right? And they knew which slide I was working on. I'm not sure why. And I also kind of hated white space, so I used to put all kinds of icons everywhere. And some people, not everyone will see it, but there's a relation. Increasing demand, there's a lot of people in there, right? There's a big line. And when I talk about supply and demand, the main idea is that there's a big line, right? There's a big line of people waiting to buy the thing, right? So that visual is going to help you retain that idea a lot better than just reading it from a text. But there's a lot of stuff in here. How much of it you actually, if I give you an exam on supply and demand right now, probably maybe one of you maybe answer correctly, right? So this is actually, you can actually read this slide, so there's really no point of me standing here reading this slide, right? So there's all kind of problem with this kind of purpose or way of actually teaching this way. So a much better way of doing this will be how to do this. Let's go back to the white. Get rid of all that stuff. I'm going to put it in here, and then I'm going to put a picture in there. Now, I will tell you the story of what supply and demand is, right? And that picture could be different. It could be that picture. It could be that. Or I can take that picture and put it in the whole screen like that. And then I will actually talk to you about increasing demand. Now, I think a lot of these things are common sense. Now, what are the benefits of doing it this way instead of the previous way? You can get a visual representation of what it is. And this, John Medina wrote a book called Brain Rules. Actually, I really, really recommend it, in which he gives you 10 things that have been research proof and about the brain. And one of them is that vision trumps all the other senses. All right? We are visual people. Right? If you read something in your mind, you're making a visual representation of it. So visuals are very, very important. Is this visual and increasing demand, are they related? Huh? Less text. Why is text a bad thing? Why is text a bad thing?
It's making pressure.
Okay, making pressure.
Well, while you're talking, I'm just reading the text.
I know. Why am I talking if I have it there, right? It's like you actually landed something that actually researchers have said. It's like you have two channels of information in your brain, right? One is the verbal channel, and then the other one is kind of the visual channel. If I'm actually, and the interesting thing is that when you use visual and words, then you go through both channels and you actually learn a lot more. But when you only use one channel, the verbal one, and you go and kind of overload that channel, you actually are learning a lot less. So when I have text here, and then I read the text to you, I'm overloading you on the kind of the text channel, the verbal channel, and it's actually more impossible. That makes sense. You're trying to read and bothering you, right? Actually, just to let you to give you time so you can read it and just move to the next slide, right? It's a lot easier for you to get the information, to receive it when you actually either read it yourself or I tell you the story. But both ways, it may not seem entirely intuitive. You actually got it, but both ways it's actually not efficient. Very good. What else? What are some of the other advantages of? What are other advantages of doing it this way instead of with a bunch of text?
The image stays in your head easier.
Huh?
The image scope is
Yeah, the image stays in your head. So it's visual, right? So the image stays in your head. So visual images is really, really a good way of actually teaching people. Visual images. Who's the, yeah?
I was going to say less focused on taking notes.
Yeah, and what's the focus now?
Looking, listening.
Oh, looking, listening, right? Now, yeah, listening. Now, taking notes is a good thing, but who is deciding what notes to take? Me or you? You are, right? So now I'm shifting some of the responsibility from the taking notes part from me to you. And you can decide just to listen, and Behar takes notes later, but you could engage in taking notes. Now, the taking notes is more efficient now because you are discriminating as to what is important and what is not. So since that process of discriminating what's important and what is not important allows you to learn better. Because again, you're riding the bike yourself, right? And not riding the bike and then telling you ride it and expect you to ride the bike. I'm actually letting you ride the bike on your own. So it's much better if I actually, instead of putting the select text here, I expect you to actually just transfer that to actually allow you to discriminate. Now, the last part is that the focus is on whom? On me now. If I think I have something to say, and the first thing about active learning we're going to talk about is about lecture, right? Because a lecture is not completely useless. There's many, many ways in which you can make a lecture a lot more efficient. But if you are going to do a lecture, just make sure that you are the one doing the lecture, not the slides, right? So you have to be the focus of, you have a story to tell, so you will actually tell that story. All right, so my first recommendation to you is what people call lecture Zen, all right? So it's a very simplistic idea, right? Forget about this, what I call this guy, Gar Reynolds, who actually wrote a really good book on presentation. And I recommend it strongly. If you're ever going to teach, I think you should read it. If you're never going to teach and you're going to do any kind of presentation in the professional arena, I think you should read it. It's a new approach to visuals and presentations. Are simple, just a visual and focuses on yourself. If you have a lot of stuff to say that you're going to put in a slide, you give people handouts, which is what I give today. So if you open your binders and you go to the lecture on active learning on STEM, so the first thing you notice in those handouts is that I am not handing you my PowerPoint slides. And the reasons I'm not handing you my PowerPoint slides are basically useless to you unless you have me there with you, right? You have to carry me with you if you want my PowerPoint slides, right? Meaning that this presentation will not work unless I'm here, right? So every time a student asks me, usually I post all my PowerPoint presentation before the class, after the class, but I never get people emailing me asking me for the PowerPoint slides. Never, right? Because I know that they're completely useless unless they're there in class. If they don't come to class, I can give you my PowerPoints, but they're not going to do anything to you, right? So if you want to see the show, you have to come to class, right? So and if you if you want to give students access, you can do podcasts of yourself and ask students to actually follow the visuals with you. But there's some expectations on the students that they will have to be doing stuff when they actually they have to be writing notes, actively writing notes, doing something at least, even when they actually there's a lecture in place. So the first thing you have in the lecture is what I call it's an incomplete outline of my presentation today. That's the first thing you have. And that's what I give my students in the class. And what I expect my students, I'm giving you the map of how things are going to work today in this class. But you are in charge of deciding what do you think is important and what is not important. And that discriminating process from the part of the student today, from the part of your own, actually allows you to do it on your own, to be active. And I've seen that you're active, right? Active learning is something that I can see. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff going in your brain, but I cannot see anything that's in your brain. I can only see you. If you are moving the pen, I know that you are actually active. And if you are discriminating your own, then you're actually much better. OK, so that's my first. Now, by the way, this is kind of so a lot of people out there who still don't follow this idea. Here's one example of it. No idea what the hell he was doing with that PowerPoint slide. So when we think about, good PowerPoint, bad PowerPoint, I think some people think about Bill Gates versus Steve Jobs, right? Maybe we see some of that in their products too. Okay. So the first suggestions I have to you in terms of actively, you can do it in anything. Don't put the whole presentation in your slide. The slides are visuals. They're not supposed to be text to read. If you want students to read, put them to the textbook. Let them read their textbook. Give them handouts, but let them read on your own. When they come to class, use the class for something else other than actually reading, right? The reading is much better outside of the class, all right? So don't put a whole slide there and expect students to read everything, and that's the class. Okay, and then I think it's a good idea to give it an outline, to give them a map that is incomplete that they have to fill up on their own. Any questions before we move to the next one? Okay, let's get our hands dirty here. The second thing that I have to point to you is that incentives are important. Incentives matter. As an economist, I always aware of that, but sometimes people have a problem seeing incentives. So the way we're going to do this is by doing a little example here and then talking about it, right? So if you go to page 7, right? If you go to page 7 on your handouts, we have one of the easiest way that you can do a quick active learning activity in your class. It's called a think, pair, chair. I actually call it think, write, pair, chair. So here's the way it works. There's a little problem here on page number 7, right? It says, what are some of the things that you do in your daily life to reduce the extent to which you deplete the planet's store of fossil fuels? Please give at least 3 concrete examples of the things you do or could do. I want you to write 3 things in there, and then once you're done, I want to turn to the person next to you and compare notes. Compare notes, all right? So write 3 on your own. Go to the person next to you, talk to the person next to you. Maybe you have to introduce yourself. And then see what the person next to you wrote and compare notes. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. Okay, so let me get your attention back. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to do activities, and then in some places we will talk about the actual activity, right? So we're in the classroom talking, but sometimes we are talking about teaching. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the balcony, and we're going to see the activity from the top, and we're going to analyze the activity, right? So when I tell you that we're going to the balcony, it means that we're not talking about the actual content of this activity, but we're talking about the process of the activity itself. So we're not talking about, when we're in the classroom, I am asking you, what did you write there? What did you write?
Recycle.
Recycle, what else?
Drive less.
Drive less, all right.
Turn electronics off at home.
Turn electronics off, all right. So we can engage in a discussion here whether recycle is actually a good thing or not, right? But there we're in the classroom, or we can talk about the activity itself. So we're going to go to the second floor, the balcony, and we're going to talk about the activity itself. So what do you think about this activity? Looking it down from the balcony, about an activity that you can do in your class. This idea of think, pair, share, and the actual activity.
I think all three parts of the activity involve active learning.
Okay. You're thinking, you're writing. You're reciting, okay, very good. So there was some noise in the classroom, so I know that was an indication that you guys were doing things. What else? Any other kind of good or bad things that you think about?
Well, you get to exchange ideas so that someone else has a different perspective than you
Yeah,
do.
you listen to someone else, right, other than yourself, right? So the person next to you might have something that you actually might not have considered.
The purpose of the content of this was meaningless for what you tried to accomplish.
Okay.
You could have done any topic whatsoever.
Yeah, you can actually do it with any topic whatsoever. So it's not topic specific, right? So you can do an activity with this with pretty much anything. It's basically making a list, right? It's making a list. Very good.
One problem, but one thing is.
No, I was actually going to, my next question was say, what are the problems with this activity?
If you don't know how to answer the question, then you get two people together that both don't know how to answer it,
Ah.
you still haven't gotten anywhere.
Let's talk about that. So if you don't know how to answer the question, then you're stuck with two people who don't know anything, and what's the point of that, right? So, okay, so let me use you again. What's your name? Jared. Jared. So Jared. So what you have, recycle, right? Is that right?
Well, it's half right.
Why is it not right?
Well, it's not wrong, but
What is it, right or is it wrong?
it helps a little bit, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Okay, it doesn't solve the problem. What do you think? Is that recycling? What did you write yourself?
I wrote carpool.
Carpool. Okay, is that right?
Well, it's the same thing. It
What?
helps, but it doesn't solve the problem.
It doesn't solve the problem. Why not?
Because you're still using fuel.
Oh, you're still using fuel. Okay. What did you write yourself?
I
Steve.
put walk instead of drive.
Walk instead of driving. What do you think? Is he better than him?
Of course.
According to you, right? What do you think? Which one is better?
Recycle.
Recycle. All right. So you think recycle. All right. So you think he's wrong.
No.
Should I take some points out? No. So okay. What do you write? What did you write?
I wrote turn off the lights when you leave the room.
Turn off the light when you leave the room. Is that right or wrong?
Right.
Right. Okay. What? I should take 2 points out, right? Now, so you see that what am I getting with this, right? Is there any right or wrong answer here? No. There is absolutely no way I can tell you take points out because you wrote recycle. I give it to him because he wrote walking instead, right? So this is an activity that has no right or wrong answer. Okay. Now it deals a little bit with your issue, so I can usually very easily use for something that serve that purpose. But what is the problem with activities that have no right or wrong answer? You don't know if your knowledge is correct or not. And there's going to be a lot of knowledge out there because there's a lot of range of things out there that you wrote that there's no way I can actually cover all of them. So there will be some people out there. If we discuss this activity, there will be some people out there who are going to be left out because they wrote something that we didn't talk about. Okay, so that's one problem. What else? Huh?
Evaluation.
I'll have to give all of you a check mark, right? All of you get the point because there's no way for me to take points out, right? Even if you wrote, there's many economists that think I write a Hummer that actually spend, only give me 6 miles per gallon. I think that's good for the environment, right? We'll talk about that why when economists say that, right? But the idea is there's no way for me to say if you're right or wrong, right? So evaluation is it's easier to grade, but there's also I cannot weight this activity very, very high. What else?
You might have other topics you want to talk about in class,
Uh-huh.
but you're having to discuss this for a while, which may not necessarily be bad, but
Okay.
still you want to cover what you
Class time. Okay, that's very important that you brought. So class time is important. If I gotta do something in class, it has to be efficient, right? It has to be something that I think is generating a lot of this knowledge. You read the chapter. When you come to class, you're doing something that is kind of creating this synapses. If this activity is not working and I'm spending all this time, and it's gonna be, this activity will generate a lot of discussion that may go in a whole different directions, right? Then you might consider perhaps something actually different than an activity like this. What else?
I actually don't feel like I learned anything through this of what is right or wrong for the economy.
Yeah,
And
you actually haven't learned very much. You learn what the person next to you say, and you learn what you think. That might be, kind of a good thing, and you get a chance to kind of move around and stuff. But in terms of learning, there's not much going on here. So I may want to do something like this, kind of like an icebreaker. But if I spend a lot of time here, I'm kind of wasting good time that I could be doing something different in here. Now, how many of you did not complete the activity, the 3? All right. How many of you did not write even one thing? So you guys are pretty good, right? You guys are very cooperative people. Can we expect our students to be that way?
somebody answered C earlier.
Yeah, somebody answered C earlier, right? So I would make the argument no, right? That if a students come to class, to get that students to do something, you're going to have to give that student an incentive to do it. Is there any way that I can actually, you come to class and you're at the end of the classroom, what is your incentive to participate?
You hope that I want to learn.
You hope that you will learn, right? So maybe you're a really optimistic person, but if you're a student here, you're at the end, you were late last night doing whatever, you get here in class, you're really apathetic, write the 3 things about her environment. That's not that much interesting, right? So is there any way that I can give you right or wrong? No, right? Is there any way that you're writing there are thinking you'll learn? Probably not, right? So all those things are actually with this. So what I'm trying to point to active learning is active. Just being active is not the end of the point here. You have to create the right incentive so you can create activities that engage students and also allow them to learn the material. Okay, so let's compare that to go to the next page, all right? And you have a kind of similar type of activity going to kind of the same topic, environmental resources. And in this one, I'm actually asking, let me grab yours here to read it. It says, you're an energy conservation-minded consumer whose only goal in choosing a car is to minimize the depletion of the planet's store of fossil fuels. You usually drive an average of 7,000 miles every year. If you cannot afford to buy a new car, should you rent a 10-year-old Buick that costs you $100 and give you 20 miles per gallon, or a 10-year-old Toyota that costs you $600 per year and give you 40 miles per gallon? And to make things simple, you're going to assume that the price of gasoline is $1. And what I want you to do is to do whatever argument you want, whatever way you want to answer. I want you to choose either the Buick or the Toyota. And then I want you to turn to the person next to you and see if the person next to you is right or if you're right and compare answers. And I'm going to give you another 2 minutes to do that. So let me get a few volunteer. Buick or Toyota? Buick or Toyota? Toyota. Buick or Toyota? Toyota. All right. Why Toyota?
Because the only criteria is just fuel consumption. We don't
Okay.
care about price.
Okay, you don't have to buy. It's fuel consumption. Did you calculate the cost?
I did, but
Okay. Let's just go over it and just. Okay. So some of you might have calculated the cost, right? So we're choosing a car. The cost of the Buick comes to about $450. That's not really complicated math, right? Most people can. It's basically there's a fixed cost of $100, and then there's a cost that's associated with how many miles you drive. You divide that by the 7,000, and since everything is $1, you add that to the 100. And then the Toyota costs $775. My numbers right? Okay. Now, which one is cheaper? So why do you choose a Toyota?
Well, because again, the only criteria is they were trying to conserve money. I'm
Ah.
sorry, not money, fuel.
Fuel.
Not money. So
Oh, okay. Did anyone choose a Buick? You did? Aha. Why is that?
Well, couldn't afford to buy a new car.
Ah, okay.
You can't buy something that you can't afford.
Okay, so you went with cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cheaper, right? What if I tell you that most economists would agree with him? And they not only say that it's cheaper, they say that it's also better for the environment. And it's not because they're American. There's also European economists will actually tell you some of this. Why would they say that? Why would they say that? I'm going to give you 30 more seconds to see if you can come up with an answer of why would an economist tell you that you chose a Toyota, you were wrong. You're not even saving the environment.
Because their goal is
Well, talk to the person next to you. What do you think? Why not talk to me? Talk to the person next to you. Why would an economist say that? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do now. We're going to go back to the balcony, all right? And I know that you're kind of like imbalanced right now with this kind of information, and you're not, maybe you don't like me very much, or you don't like economists very much. Let's put that all aside. Let's go to the balcony. What do you think about this activity versus the previous one? Any differences? Any particular thing that this one is better or worse? What do you think?
I was thinking that the big Buick you will drive less.
Okay, but without going into the extra, we're in the balcony now, right? So we're talking about the actual activity and not about the concept. So for the time being, suspend this belief, right, about the fact that I think Buick is the right answer. Just put that aside. Let's talk about the activity itself.
it's a lot more practical and more engaging.
More engaging. What do you think is more engaging?
Because we actually drive every day.
Okay.
Drive to some place, drive to work, drive to school.
It's
So
close.
It's something people have to deal with
Yeah.
on a daily basis.
It's close to you, right? So the content is important because I'm making it relevant to you. Very good. What else? Any other kind of, why do you think, were most of you engaged with this one more than the other one? Okay, yeah.
It really makes you think more. 'Cause there's
Why?
numbers involved.
There's numbers involved, right? So it's
Analytical approach to it.
yeah, so it's not, I mean, it's not super easy, but it's also not super hard too. So it has something, but you have to think a little bit, definitely more than the other one. The other one, you could have written 3 things there, and who cares, right? But in this one, you have to think, right? You have to think a little bit in order to answer, right? Some of you might thought a little bit at the beginning, some of you might thought less later on, but there's a lot more thinking here. What else? Why would this activity better or worse? Yes.
You could actually give a grade for this. There should be only one answer if you only take what's in the question.
Yeah, indeed. If I think that there is in fact the right answer, right, I could give a grade for this. And I could give grades that are discriminating based on what your answer was. If I think that the final answer is more important and it's the process, then I can grade you on your thinking a little bit. If I actually ask you to write the calculations or to write whatever argument you had, I can just grade that part, right? But I can discriminate more in the grading part. So therefore, I'm giving you an automatic incentive to be a little more engaged. Very good. What else? Why was this activity more engaging than the previous one?
Energy conservation is a whole topic.
Oh, energy conservation is an interesting topic too, so I'm putting it in here too, which was in the other one, but I'm putting it in here too in a kind of in a different way. Why was different about this one that was more engaging? What else was different?
Like people get like opposite ideas.
Yeah, opposite idea, right? That's what we want. Conflict is interesting, right? If you get to pick the Toyota and you get to pick the Buick, that's a perfect teaching moment, right? You're going to argue with each other, and hopefully you guys will learn something, right? So argument, conflict is engaging, conflict of interest. If everyone agrees with you, then that's boring, right? Contrast is very, very interesting, right? That's people in the news know that, right? So that's what make people kind of interested in anything. So if I can create conflict. Now, at the beginning here, there was no conflict. Most of you chose the Toyota, right? So what did I do?
Told us we were all wrong.
Yes. So what am I doing here, right? So there's two things I'm doing, right? So let's go back. They're still from the balcony. What I'm telling you here is that the content of the activity, that's kind of the main thing that I want you to take with you. It's not just active learning for active learning. The content of the activity is very important, right? The content here was different. You were making a choice. Now, you chose the Toyota, right? Right. And then if I tell you the Buick, you already chose something. You have certain degree of kind of like attachment to that answer, right? I'm right. If you're going to tell me I'm not right, that kind of bothers me a little, right? I need to find out why it's not right, right? So there's definitely that there. Now, so what did I do? I did two things when I tell you that economists actually are not agreeing with you. I created conflict because now I do not agree with you, and now you have an incentive perhaps to try to find why is he not agreeing with me? Why economists don't agree with me, right? I created conflict in the classroom, and at the same time what I'm doing is I'm opening a curiosity gap, right? And I'm making you curious. And that way, and this is the type of activity in which I can control that. So you can do an activity in class in this one, like this one, and you can get most people to get one answer, so it kind of didn't work the way you wanted. And you can still make it very useful by simply saying, I do not agree with you, or there's something that you have not considered. And that is create conflict, all right? So this approach is actually one that is been promoted by a lot of people studying motivation, particularly in business. It hasn't not filtered out a lot to education, but we're trying to actually change that. Anyone have read this book? I strongly recommend it, right? So in this book, they make six attention. You need to have 6 things. 3 of these things are very, very relevant for classroom. The problem of the activity have to be simple but not obvious, right? And this was the case on this one. It looked pretty simple at the beginning, but it's not obvious. I have to be concrete, meaning that you have to make an action. I'm forcing you to make a choice. And we'll talk about that in a second here. I'm making you force a commitment. And the answer is unexpected. Right? And when you actually did it first with the Toyota, most of you thought, oh, this is pretty easy. This is probably the answer. When I tell you that economists don't agree with you, that's unexpected. Right? And what I'm doing here is I am creating a gap of curiosity. And when people don't know that, and biologists and researchers have actually studied this, when you don't know something and you have committed yourself to an answer, you have almost a biological need to know the answer, right? It doesn't work with anyone, but you have a lot more chance of engaging your student when you create a gap of curiosity with them and you have forced them to engage and become invested in the answer than when you simply ask them to make a list. How many of you want to know why economists chose? Right? How many of you want the answer to the problem? How many of you would like to know the answer? Right? So isn't that, I got maybe 3/4. When was the last time you can ask your student whether you want to be in class and know the answer? How many of you want to know the answer whether it was glass or aluminum, the one that comes down? I haven't told you that one, right? So some of you, I bet, might not leave here until you know that answer to that question, right? When was the last time a student of yours didn't want to leave the class because they know the answer? Until I tell you the answer, you're mine, right? I have you because you are curious, right? So that's not really difficult to do, right? So the things you have to do are very, very simple. Create contract, create conflict, make people curious, ask them to become involved. 4, get some commitment. All the activities that you do in class, they will work a lot better when you force people to make a commitment, right? Because if I think I'm right and you think I'm not, why am I not right? I want to know what the answer is because I already chose one, right? Very, very important. Any questions? Okay, so we had the video, right? We saw it already. And the question I asked for you was whether the fifth part of the puzzle on this is the feedback. Now, this question I was able to get some feedback from you, right? And we can kind of discuss it a little more. But how you actually interact with the students to get the feedback from them is critical too, okay? Which one of you, I asked you the question about which one is going to be faster or not. Aluminum, glass, and C is the same, right? How many of you think aluminum? Raise your hand. How many of you think glass? Raise your hand. How many of you think the same? Raise your hand. Okay. So this is a great teaching moment to have. The class is almost divided perfectly among the three choices, right? So I have conflict. You have to make a choice. So I bet you want to know whether you're right or not. Unless you're a physics. How many physics person? Raise your hand. 2. So you're hot commodities right now, right? Because you should know the answer to this question, right? So, but if in a classroom when you have people divided like this, it's a perfect teaching opportunity, right? Because you have conflict. You have people made a choice, right? So now you have to use that, right? So I gave you the show of hands. How good of a feedback mechanism is that to communicate with my students?
Well, most people, I mean, a lot of people won't raise their hands when you do that.
Yeah, why would you raise your hand, right? I mean, I'm the one I never raise my hand anyway, right? So I still depending kind of on you, and I think most of you raise your hand because I think I made the content interesting enough that you care so much that you raise your hand, right? What else do you think about raising your hand? Is it good or bad thing? Yeah, people are afraid to be wrong, so I'm making a public statement here, right? And if you're rational, right, and they say whether A, what you do is you leave your hand down until you see how many people get up, and it's like more than 3, then you're not going to be the only one that you leave up, right? But if more people raise a hand and you didn't, you're going to stay down there, right? You're not going up with a hand at all, right? And I don't know that. I don't know that. You stay with your hand down. Everyone raised their hand. I thought, well, they got it. Let's just move on. But you didn't raise your hand because you were afraid, which is a completely rational decision to make, right? So there's definitely a problem with the hand raising that way. Now, it's a good thing because if you are, in fact, raising your hand, you're making a public commitment to me that you think this is the right answer. And that will engage you more because now I said A. I even told you I say A. You're saying it's not. Why is that, right? I want to make sure that why am I right, why am I wrong? But the hand has a lot of problems, and the hand is also allowed me to see what is the distribution, right? So I was able, by raising your hand, see that a third of you did think A, a third of you think B, a third of you think C. So that was very useful in that, but it has all these other problems. What else can I do with it? All right, so one way of solving that situation of feedback is by allowing you to use these clickers that you have in your hand, which is what we did before. And let's do it one more time here. Aluminum, glass, or the same. I chose this. I put the C in there. So click your answer, and we'll see what we get. And you can talk to the person next to you if you're still kind of conflicted here. All right, so let's see what we got here. Let's see what people, oh. C is going higher here. And I close the voting right now. C is getting higher. Who answers C? Why do you answer C? Oh, you have the physics guy next to you, so I'm not going to ask you. All right, who answers C here from the back of the room? Who answers C? All right, why C?
Isn't it a gravity thing, really? First of all, C was not an option for us in the beginning.
Exactly. So the fact that I put it there maybe means that that's the right answer, right? So that's the way you answer exams too, right?
I'm sorry?
That's the way we answer exams too, right? And we don't know, we cannot guess. And if the answer is not well corrected, that might be true, right? Okay, so what's your discipline? Math, okay. So it's not expected for you to know the fact about the physics. You went with the rationality, okay? You said the gravity thing, right? So it definitely has to do something. Who answered B? B. Who said B? Why B?
Because the density of the glass is much greater than the density of the glass.
So you went with the density of the glass. The density of the glass is much greater than the density of the aluminum. Okay. So you see there is a difference, right? There's not the same. All right. Who answered A? A. The physics guy here answered A. Uh-oh. Why?
Well, first of all, I admit I don't remember that law, so.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't
So no, that's all right. That's all right.
I remember
No, I'm not
aluminum.
taking your points out or anything, right? All right.
Aluminum is used in mu metal, which shields against magnetic fields. And
Uh-huh.
remember, glass is an insulator. So
Uh-huh. But not obvious. Is you're making a choice. And the interesting thing now is that I can see you don't have to make a public choice. So you can click, whether if you click A, B, or C, no one is going to know, right? Because it's your own choice. You can tell for the person next to you if you want to. Now I have conflict in the classroom, and I can ask you, these two guys, Jared and Emmanuel are the fixed people here. They're on disagreement with most of you because you thought was A. Did you choose A too?
Well, I mean, I said C, but I didn't know what the experiment
You don't know what the experiment was. So we have some disagreement. I open it for discussion again now for you to discuss with the person next to you, and you probably have a lot range of other things to say, but you are actually engaging with the person next to you. You're exchanging ideas. That's where learning occurs, right? And I can see the choices, right? I can see the screen here that we have. Okay. What do I have here next? Clickers. We talk about that. Okay. So clickers. Oh, you want to see the video? That's right. I want to see the video. Wait, hold on. So let's put the video again. The whole video. The whole video. Here we go. It's pretty fast, right? All right, here's a slow motion here. Aluminum, all right? Aluminum was the answer. Now I lost, I gave you the answer already, right? So at some point here, I'm gonna lose some of you, might actually be, but I still, even if I gave you the answer, I might have not actually, go up. The answer is A. The answer is A.
B. The glass one. The original answer was.
Oh, the original answer, yeah, so that's gonna be. The original answer, yeah, that'd be. Now, but even after I gave you, I gave you the answer, there still might be some disagreement, so I can still talk about this problem by saying, why is it that I'm right? I'm still not seeing it. So I know that half of the people are there, so I can spend more time talking about it, and then I can have perhaps a question that is related or kind of going to the same topic to see whether you actually got it or not. But in the process, I was able to engage you in the activity. I was able to get you to talk to the people next to you. And in that process, what is happening? Synapses, right? Because you are working on this. And you have a more likelihood of remembering this than if I just told you in a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so that's kind of the idea with clickers. So you can use clickers for a bunch of different things. What about this question? What do you think about that? Huh? What's the answer here? All right, so I have some disagreement. I won't do the clickers. What is the difference between this question and the question before?
Non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable, right? So it's a one answer or not, which is kind of the way before. But before, you may still think that, well, maybe sometimes another. Here, there's a fact, right? What else is different between this question and the previous one? Huh? You either know or you don't, right? So it's like a factual question. So when you're thinking about questions for your class, you should think better about conceptual questions, right? So in this question, we know that 1859 is that is the Declaration of Independence. Wonder who that is, right? 1800, here's one. Now the answer is A, right? The answer is A was also the day, but it's factual information, right? So it's not as effective as the previous question because the previous question is conceptual, all right? So for STEM, we have a host of questions out there that are available to us for this technical discipline to actually make students think questions that are simple but not concrete, right? But not obvious, that are concrete, right? Try to stay away from factual questions like this one. Same as this one. This is a little better, right? What the probability of getting a head count when a coin is tossed? So show of hands, A, B, C. So that's the problem with this question, right? It's too easy. So you won't create that conflict in the classroom. People are not going to be so engaged. It cannot be obvious, right? The question, the answer cannot be obvious. Single card is drawn from a deck. The probability that the card is a king or club is about A. All right, let's do it. We have a little bit of time here to play with this one. I think this one is. All right, so click your answer. If you think you know it, help the people next to you. Good question, right? Because, again, we have conflict in the classroom. We have people. You want to make mistakes, right? That's the way you learn. A question that everyone got right in the classroom is not useful. You put that in the blackboard, put that in the online homework, reading comprehension, those things in the classroom don't work so well. In the classroom, what you want is to have conflict. What you want is to have people who think the answers are different, right? Again, same situation as before. We have the class divided. Some people think A, some people think B, all right? I'll tell you the answer to that one later on. And I kind of enjoy that myself, make you suffer a little bit. Okay, so this is a much better question. You can also do questions like this with the clickers, but again, I wouldn't spend much time in questions like this in class. Unless what you want is actual discussion about the issue. In that case, just fine. But if you want to actually teach a particular thing in the class, just make sure that you know kind of the limitations of different type of questions, right? The content is important. This question, does it have a right or wrong answer? No. Yeah, to you, of course, because you're right. I mean, come on, I'm right. It's like I actually feel very strong about an answer here. I won't tell you what the answer is, but the problem is that there's no way to that I can, as an instructor, discriminate, right? So in that sense, there's a difference between the previous question and this one. You can make. I think you don't necessarily have to be completely serious all the time, and I put this question in my class. So, is there any right or wrong answer here? I think I know the answer to this one, right? You may actually think the answer. I'm not going to poll you on that because I may get depressed, so I don't want to actually see that. Okay. There's another things that I can do with clickers. So let's say you have this question, which most of you are not economists. It's not intuitive. If you have taken a principles, you might actually answer this right away. If you have not taken a principle class, it's not completely intuitive. Let's say you have this situation where you have your class divided, right? So you have conflict in your class. You can actually do this. So what am I doing by that? Why would I do something like that? Huh? I create an incentive, right? So what's the incentive I'm giving here?
If you get it right and everybody else gets it right.
Yeah, that I'm giving an incentive to people most people to get it right? So what is the incentive I'm giving to the people who really know the answer? Share it, right? Share it, start talking, right? Because if you, this is pretty easy. I just say, it's ready, I don't want to talk to anyone, what's the point? I'm saying it's good for you to actually share the answer with someone. And that's going to be helpful for you because a lot of people actually say that one of the things you didn't mention at the beginning, what are some of the ways of learning? What some of the ways of learning are by teaching. Right? One of the best ways you learn is by teaching what you know to someone else. Right? So I'm giving an incentive to people to teach what they know, they think they know, and at the same time, people, if I have a large class, I cannot go with anyone, I'm giving incentive to the good students to help me out. Right? I'm giving the good students to help me out. So this you can do with clickers. Now, one more thing that we can do here, what I want you guys to do before we end. First, I want you guys very quick, we're going to do that in the last 10 minutes. You're going to have 5 minutes for this. I want you to work on groups of 4. And we're going to work with the problems on page number 11 on the handout. Page number 11. I want to have groups of 4. All right, here's the only key in choosing your partners. I cannot have more than 2 people in the same line or the same row being in the same group. No more than 2 people of the same row, no more than 2 people of the same row can be in one group. And I want you to find 3 more people that you're going to work with. I want groups of 4. Find those people. Okay, you need one? Okay, so here's how this works. All right, pay attention here for a moment, guys. So here's how this works. This is what we call this is called a scratch off, right? So if I scratch the A on number 1, right, that refers to question number 1. If you scratch and A has a star, you know that you got it right. If A doesn't have a star, you're wrong. Now what I can do here is I will penalize you, right? I will penalize you every time you have a scratch that has a blank and doesn't have a star. And you're working as a group, right? So as a group, what you want to do is to maximize your points, all right? Go for it. You can scratch whenever you want, but you have to return that scratch off to me. Okay. Anyone needs scratch off? Any group that needs a scratch off? Here we go. Don't scratch until you know it. Don't scratch until you know it. There you go. Anyone? Anyone? Oh, sorry. Got that one? Here's, you pass that. All right, here we go. All right, guys. So let me call your attention again one more time. Let me call your attention back here, right? See, this is what happens, right? When was the last time that people were so engaged that they don't even want to pay attention to what you're saying, right? Isn't that what you want in the classroom, right? Okay, so but we do have to finish up. So, what do you think about the scratch off? What do you think of the scratch offs? You can't change your answer. You have to commit to one. You get immediate feedback. How about the group work? How does that work for you? Let's go to the back. I know you guys want to know the answers, and I will let you scratch until you die here in a second. But let's finish up here one moment. Okay. What was I saying? Yeah. Oh yeah. Cooperation. Shh. What do you think of the group work? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Was it better to have people working with you instead of your own? That, I think most people would agree, yes. What are the probability of you getting the right answer increase when you have more people, right? So for most of your students that don't like group work, and actually, to be honest, group work is really hard for most people. I actually don't like it a lot myself when I go to the workshop, to be completely honest. But the problem is in here is that learning is hard work. So you cannot expect a lot of the students to do the things that are in their own benefit. But I think there is something to the fact that you can alleviate some of their stress about group work if you make the group work in their mind more useful. And I think this is a very good way of making group work useful, because it's very easy for you to agree that the more people you have in your group, the better each person is going to be. Right? Okay. These guys are really into it. Right? This is great. Okay, any questions about the scratch off? These are really easy to use. They're really inexpensive. If you have questions about, you're going to teach a class, and you have questions about how to use it, you can talk to me, and we can talk about how to order and so forth.